What happens when you're born into history, not as someone who makes it, but as someone who receives it? For Jimmy Carter's children, that question wasn't just an idea. It was real, felt, lived through. While Jimmy went from peanut farmer to president, his 4 children, Jack, James, Donnel, and Amy, lived in the big shadow of that surprising rise. Their stories are quiet, not always well known, but they show something special. A peek into the private cost of being in public life. We start in the countryside of Georgia, before the White House, before the Nobel Peace Prize, before the world saw the Carters as signs of goodness and kindness in American politics. They were just a family trying to make life work. Jack Carter, the oldest son, was born in 1947. At the time, Jimmy was in the Navy. The Carters moved a lot: Virginia, Hawaii, Connecticut, before finally going back to Plains, Georgia. Going back was a big moment. Jimmy left his Navy job to run the family peanut business. The change brought both calm and stress. Jack's early years were like those of many kids raised in close southern towns: dusty baseball fields, Sunday church, family meals. But there was also pressure, a kind of heavy feeling that stayed with the Carter boys. Their father, even then, was serious, hard-working, and full of strong rules. And their mother, Rosalind, held the family together, caring but also very strong. By the time Jack got to high school, it was clear he had his own way of thinking. He went to Georgia Tech, joined the Navy like his dad, and later studied how nuclear energy works. But while Jimmy's path went toward politics and world issues, Jack's path was more winding. He had a hard time, not with being smart, but with knowing what to do. He tried law school, quit. He worked many different jobs, from builder to politics helper. Like many people his age, Jack was trying to figure out who he was in a world that didn't let him stay unknown. By the 1970s, Jimmy Carter's political rise was happening quickly. He was the governor of Georgia. Then came 1976, the year that changed everything. Jimmy Carter was elected President of the United States, and suddenly, the Carter children weren't just kids anymore. They were now known by the whole country. For Jack, that meant people started looking closely at everything he did. Every mistake he had made before was now open for people to talk about. Every goal he had now came with the Carter name. He got married and had kids, including Jason Carter, who would later follow the family path into Georgia's state senate and try to become governor. But Jack's own life stayed quietly messy. In 2006, he ran for the U.S. Senate in Nevada, a state he had moved to years earlier. The campaign was full of energy, honest, but didn't win. He lost to the current Republican Senator, John Ensign. Still, it wasn't really a failure. It was just Jack being Jack, strongly independent, standing up for what he believed in, even when it was hard. Then there was James Earl "Chip" Carter III, born in 1950. He was the second son, more shy, more private. While Jack was openly bold, Chip was quieter and kept to himself. But that didn't mean he didn't care. In many ways, Chip was the one closest to his dad in politics during the presidency. He helped on Jimmy's 1976 campaign and later worked as a political expert for the Democratic Party. Still, Chip's life wasn't only about politics. He got married young, became a dad, and later started a computer help business. He worked on local problems, spoke up for nature, and built a life that was smart, simple, and steady. Still, being the son of a president is never easy. Every choice was looked at closely. Every mistake seemed bigger. In the 1980s, Chip had trouble with drugs and alcohol, a personal fight he later won by being honest and brave. His truth about getting better became a quiet sign of the strength that ran through the Carter family. Then there was Donnel Jeffrey "Jeff" Carter, born in 1952, the third son, the one who, in many ways, stayed farthest from public life. Jeff's path was technical and steady. He got degrees in geography and making maps with computers. He loved the new world of satellite pictures and remote sensing, far from cameras, far from arguments. But even Jeff couldn't completely avoid the pull of the Carter name. In the 1980s, he helped start a company called Computer Mapping Consultants, working on mapping jobs for the government and private businesses. His work was important, though quiet. It showed a different kind of family story, one based on skill, not fame. He got married, had kids, and mostly stayed out of talking about his dad's time as president. His life shows that sometimes the strongest messages come from simply living a good, focused life. Then came Amy. Amy Carter was born in 1967, 15 years after Jeff. The world was different by then, and her experience, unlike her brother's, would be very different. But Amy's story deserves its own space, its own time, its own part. Because where the sons lived in Jimmy's shadow, Amy was pushed right into his bright spotlight. A spotlight she didn't ask for. And that's where we'll start again. Next, Amy Carter was just 9 years old when her father became President of the United States, while her older brothers had the time, or maybe the stress, of growing up before Jimmy Carter became well known across the country. Amy's life began in full view of the public. For America, she was instantly easy to spot. The little girl with pigtails who moved into the White House carrying books and stuffed animals. But behind the big eyes and quiet look was a child who had to grow up while the whole country was watching. From the very start, Amy's time in the White House was different. No child had lived there since John F. Kennedy Jr., and even he was only there for a short time. Amy's arrival brought a feeling of childhood back to a place usually known for power, not play. She had a treehouse built on the White House lawn. She read books during fancy dinners. She roller skated through the old hallways. The news loved it. But for Amy, it wasn't always fun. Every move she made, every book she read, every look on her face, it all became a big deal. When people saw her reading The People's History of the United States or the autobiography of Malcolm X, it wasn't just a kid learning new things. It became big news. When she got restless at events, people said she had bad manners. When she stayed quiet, they said she was cold. Imagine being 10, 11, 12 years old and having everything you do seen as a message to the country. Rosalind Carter did what she could to keep Amy safe from all the attention. The Carters tried to help her stay normal. She went to a regular public school in Washington, D.C., something rare for a president's child, and her mother wanted Amy to live like any other kid. But things weren't really normal. Other kids treated her differently. Teachers expected more from her. Secret Service agents followed her everywhere. It was a strange and often lonely childhood. Then came the 1980 election. Jimmy Carter lost to Ronald Reagan, and the family had to leave the White House, quickly and without any big goodbye. For Amy, it was confusing. One day, she lived in the most famous house in America. The next, she was back in Georgia, trying to be a normal teen. She didn't chase fame after that, but it still found her. As she grew up, Amy Carter got involved in politics, but not the way her dad had, not with rules and deals, but with protests and strong beliefs. In the 1980s and early 1990s, she often went to protests, especially those against unfair treatment in South Africa and U.S. actions in Central America. In 1986, she got arrested at a protest at the University of Massachusetts, where she was speaking out against the CIA trying to hire students. The arrest was big news. The trial that followed got even more attention. Amy and 14 others were found not guilty. The court said the CIA being on campus was more dangerous than the protest itself. It was a big moment. The daughter of a former president, standing up for her beliefs, calmly saying what she thought, and not acting the way others expected. Jimmy and Rosalind didn't stop her. They admired her passion, even if it worried them. Amy's activism wasn't for show. It came from deep care, careful thinking, and a strong sense of right and wrong. But it wasn't easy. She stayed away from the public, not because she was ashamed, but to protect herself. She wanted to live and grow without being watched. Over time, Amy earned a college degree from the Memphis College of Art, and later a master's degree in art history from Tulane University. She married James Wenzel, a computer expert she met while studying, and had one son, Hugo. Her life became quiet, but full. Amy's connection to the public changed as time went on. She didn't do interviews. She didn't write tell-all books. She didn't try to make money off her famous name. In fact, she stayed away from fame on purpose. But behind the scenes, she stayed involved. She joined the board of the Carter Center, helping with human rights and fairness, continuing her father's work, not with big speeches, but with quiet actions. Even today, most Americans don't know much about Amy Carter, not because there's nothing to say, but because she chooses not to shout. And in a time when life often feels like a show, her choice to live quietly, with purpose, may be the strongest message of all. From Jack to Amy, each Carter child chose a different way to live, but they all had to face the same challenge, being themselves in a world that wanted them to be something else. And still, there's one more part to the story, one that goes beyond Jimmy Carter's children, into the lives of their children. The Carter story didn't stop with them. It changed. A legacy isn't just what we leave behind. It's how it lives on through those who carry our name. For Jimmy Carter's children, the weight of their father's name never fully left them. But as the years passed and their kids grew up, a new story began, one that stretches from the small town of Plains, Georgia, to campaign stages, office buildings, art rooms, and schools. The next generation of Carters quietly started to build a legacy of their own. The most well-known of the Carter grandchildren is Jason Carter, Jack Carter's son. Born in 1975, Jason grew up between two worlds, one with deep Southern traditions and another full of national attention and political chances. His grandfather's time as president was still fresh in people's minds, and with that came both special treatment and high expectations. But Jason didn't want to just be known as a Carter. He wanted to earn his own way. After finishing college at Duke University, Jason joined the Peace Corps, something his grandparents often told young people to try. He worked in South Africa, where he taught at schools in the countryside and learned about life after apartheid. It wasn't a fancy job, but it changed him. Jason came back to the U.S. with a strong desire to help others and a better understanding of unfairness around the world, ideas that clearly matched his grandfather's. He later earned a law degree and began working as a lawyer in Georgia, but by 2010, he couldn't stay away from politics. Jason ran for and won a spot in the Georgia State Senate. His campaign wasn't just about his last name. He focused on real issues, fair government, better school funding, and clear, honest leadership. But the 2014 race for governor really put him in the spotlight. Running as a Democrat in a state that was becoming more Republican, Jason Carter tried to keep the Carter values alive, mixing progressive ideas with a calm, balanced style. He ran against the current governor, Republican Nathan Deal. The race was close, emotional, and full of meaning. Jimmy Carter, in his 90s, even helped his grandson campaign, a full-circle moment for the family. In the end, Jason lost. But his run earned respect and brought new energy to Democratic politics in Georgia, a wave that would grow in later elections. Even though Jason is still involved in politics, he now focuses on more than just elections. Today, he leads the Carter Center's Board of Trustees, helping guide the global work his grandfather started. From fighting diseases to making elections fair across the world, Jason hasn't tried to be exactly like Jimmy, but he walks a path close to his, with purpose and care. But Jason isn't the only Carter grandchild finding meaning in his own way. Hugo James Wenzel, Amy Carter's son, was born in 1999 and grew up away from the spotlight his mom worked hard to avoid. But in recent years, Hugo's name came up again, not because of trouble or politics, but because of something simple: curiosity. In 2023, Hugo appeared on a reality show called Claim to Fame, where people who are related to celebrities compete without revealing their identity. Hugo didn't say who he was right away, but when he did, viewers were surprised. Not just because he was Jimmy Carter's grandson, but because of how kind, honest, and thoughtful he was. He spoke about Amy with deep respect. He talked about Jimmy with wonder. And just like that, a new group of young Americans, many too young to remember Jimmy Carter, got to see his legacy through Hugo. He was soft-spoken, calm, and wise, traits that felt familiar. The other Carter grandchildren have chosen quieter paths. Some work in technology, others in teaching. A few stay completely out of the public eye, not because they aren't driven, but because they care about privacy in a world that often forgets how important that is. There's something brave about that, a quiet kind of strength. And maybe that's the lasting truth of the Carter story. While many political families seek attention, the Carters never seem to crave it. They used their power carefully, served others without showing off, And that way of living, serving without making a show, still lives on in their children and grandchildren. In a time when many people try to be noticed, the Carters remind us of something that feels rare now. That true legacy isn't about being loud, but about making a lasting difference. Rosalind died in late 2023, and with her passing came the end of one of the quietest but strongest partnerships in American history. For their children and grandchildren, the sadness is deep, but so is the thankfulness. Because beyond the history, beyond the headlines and awards, the Carter family has built something even stronger, a lasting family promise to live with meaning. Whether through politics, protest, science, or silence, each one has added their own line to a long, quietly powerful story. And in the final part of this story, we return to where it all began, Plains, Georgia, where history, memories, and meaning come together. It always comes back to Plains. Even though the Carter name has traveled to big places, Washington, Johannesburg, Atlanta, even the United Nations, its home is still one small Georgia town with red dirt, front porches, and the calm pace of country life. Plains isn't just where Jimmy Carter was born, it's where the Carter family keeps going back, where their story ends, and where it begins again. By the time Jimmy Carter went into hospice care in early 2023, the world watched closely. Here was a man who had outlived almost all of his old friends, beaten cancer, healed from a broken hip and brain surgery, and still found time, even in his late 90s, to teach Sunday school, help build houses, and write books. But as his time in public life came to an end, it wasn't the rules or politics that stood out. It was his family sitting close by. Jack, Chip, Jeff, and Amy, they were all there, along with grandkids, great-grandkids, in-laws, and neighbors, sitting quietly in the same house where Jimmy and Rosalind had raised them, told bedtime stories, and always said grace before eating. The Carter story, once told through big headlines, had become something softer and closer. It wasn't just about legacy anymore, it was about love. When Rosalind died in November 2023, it was the first big loss in the Carter family since Jimmy was president. For her kids, the sadness was both deeply personal and very public. Many people came to her memorial service, and while important guests filled the seats, it was her children's words that people remembered. Jack spoke about how loyal she was. Amy read a letter. Chip stood silently with tears. They didn't try to show their grief, they simply felt it. And through that, they reminded everyone that even famous people are still moms, dads, and grandparents. Since then, the Carter children have stepped into new roles, not just keeping history alive, but carrying on their parents' life work. Jack, now in his late 70s, still works on issues for veterans and mental health. He often talks about the cost of war, having served in Vietnam and lost friends. Lately, he's spent more time with his family. His dreams of politics may be in the past, but his sense of duty is still strong. Chip has focused on spiritual healing. After many years of facing ups and downs, including fighting addiction, he found peace in faith and quiet work. He still helps the Carter Center, though not in ways that make the news. Organizing papers, guiding younger people, and speaking at small events about peace, fairness, and family. Jeff, the quietest of the brothers, works in technology and caring for the earth. His job in mapping and land data might not be flashy, but it follows the Carter way. Do good work, even if no one notices. When asked about his dad, Jeff once said, "He never told us we had to change the world. He just showed us how." Amy, now in her 50s, is still the most private. She lives quietly in Atlanta, raising her son, supporting human rights, and helping remember her parents through art and quiet leadership at the Carter Center. She rarely speaks to the public, but when she does, people listen, not because she's famous, but because they respect her. Together, the Carter children have become a link between history and real life. They are not like the Kennedys, treated as legends, or like the Bushes and Clintons, building political families. Instead, they show a different kind of legacy, one based on kindness, calmness, and real dignity. But maybe what's most special about the Carter children isn't what they did, it's what they didn't do. They didn't use the family name to gain fame. They didn't turn their pain into headlines. They didn't rush to tell their stories or chase the spotlight. They just lived, with values, with limits, and with respect for what their parents built and taught them. Their story is a quiet testament to strength, patience, and selfless service. Rather than seeking power or fame, the Carter family chose love and people, and in doing so, they left a lasting legacy.